tonight to talk about some projects that Ethan and I have done involving the carving, and that shows some of them on the first screen. But there are 4 projects we're going to talk about. The Totem Pole, which I made in 2011. A Bentwood Box, that's what's right over there, made that in 2012. A turtle panel, this one, which I made this year. And last but certainly not least is a pike that Ethan carved as a school project. So he's going to talk about that. First of all, we've got very many First Nations out on the West Coast. And the group that I guess is the most influential, certainly on me, are the Haida, here on Haida. And there are a lot of other groups. I used to live down in this area down here where the macaw were very much in evidence. And these are just the main groups. There are a lot of other subgroups of these and everything else. But so I've admired their work for quite a long time. Ever since I can really remember. And we have over the years purchased several of their pieces. Never really thought that I would be able to do something like that. I never really considered myself to be at all artistic. But about in 2011, Lloyd Thomas, you may know, he used to work at the Lee Valley East store, the name of the convent, actually conducted a 4-day workshop at the Lee Valley East store, and there were 6 of us on the course, and we all had these 4-foot totem poles, that's mine, that we carved, and it was amazing that we all turned out reasonably good totem poles. And I really didn't think I could do it. And the main reason I think I can is that it's quite abstract. You don't actually have to draw a person that looks like a person or a horse that looks like a horse or anything like that. Basically, you just have to put together a few symbols, and that's basically it. Various degrees of those symbols. And I guess I could point with this. And if you can put those in some kind of a reasonable form, you can draw, or you can design anyway. So I'm a pretty good designer, very mediocre drawer. But with this stuff, it's just perfect for me. And so here's I'm going to go through the steps that we did to make a totem pole. Basically, Lloyd had pre-done about 8 different designs and put them on paper. And each one shows a rough cut, which is the first thing you do, the rough cut. Once you get the rough cut done, then you go and work on the fine thing. So we could pick a couple of animals, the symbols. So I picked the raven, who's the trickster and the person that's always doing naughty things or unusual things. And down at the bottom, I picked the beaver, who's very industrious and sticks to his job. For me, that was a nice set of contrasts. So my totem pole's got the raven, well, it's actually got a loon on the top. We'll talk about that a little later. But then it's got the raven as the main thing and the beaver on the bottom. So the first thing I did is spend about 2 hours. I bought a Lee Valley hatchet, well, it actually came from Finland. And Lloyd told us, had to spend the first couple of hours destroying the hatchet. No, changing the entire shape of the hatchet to make it more curved and sharper, and so that it could actually be used as a carving instrument. And so once we got this hatchet in decent shape, essentially all we did, we had a mallet and the hatchet, and we cut big chunks of wood out of the log, and chips on the floor shows. And we spent the first day hacking away at the log. That was a lot of fun. Not much artistry required there at all. The next day we came in and we spent the day smoothing our rough cuts. So it started with chisels and then moved to file and a sanding block with 40 grit paper. So really very rough sandpaper. And then I finished up with a foam back 120 grit sandpaper by hand and got a nice smooth finish on what I had. But you notice no power tools. There are some people that do some of this carving with power tools. I don't use power tools for any of this. So the third day we spent with gouges, and more like you would consider to be woodworking, to be carving tools. So for instance, here's a parting tool I used, which actually cut the tail, design of the tail on the beaver. Here's a gouge where I gouged out the eyes of the beaver. And there's lots of different tools for different purposes. I find that in fact, though, I've got a box here, which shows that most of the work I do with that set of tools right there. In fact, all of this I did with those tools. This on the right-hand side kind of shows, after the third day, the way my totem pole looked. The fourth and last day we were there, the first thing we did was we put stain on the wall, because you can see it was very white. That we used, in this case, we're using Ontario white birch, and the ideal thing to use is Western yellow cedar. Sorry, not Ontario white birch. Ontario white cedar. Sorry, and the ideal thing is Western red cedar, yellow cedar or red cedar, but we didn't have that, and so basically we ended up with a very pale looking thing. So I used stained the whole thing. You really should use an oil-based stain. A couple of people in the group tried a water-based stain, it just didn't do a very good job. So coat everything with an oil-based stain. And then use essentially the acrylic paints. You can buy at, you can buy them at dollar stores, but Michael's has a pretty good selection of different colors, and that's where I got mine. And just little inexpensive paintbrushes, and you paint it. And then I applied 2 coats of oil-based spar urethane, and the design of the pole you see is primarily Lloyd's. There's 2 things that I did that added to it. I decided that I'd put a little loon up at the top. Now, that loon, it doesn't look, not a very good looking loon, but you can sort of tell it's a loon. Looks like a little baby loon. And that's too realistic. If you're sticking with the style that they have on the West Coast, it would be more abstract than that. So that's my own little addition. The other thing I did is I drilled a couple of holes in the hands, and where I could stick a stick through there. I put the stick and left it in the trunk of the car. And essentially you can see the beaver chewing on the stick. So that was the other addition I made. But primarily this is Lloyd's. What's that?
Our names.
Oh, sorry, Ethan said one more thing. Yes, there's one more thing. I put the names of my grandson and my granddaughter on the inside of the hands, where they're hard to see, but they are there. What's next? It's a while since I've carved the pole. There's a friend had a 12-foot pole, dry cedar, again it's Ontario cedar, on the lake where my cabin is, near Hearst, Ontario. And he let me have it for nothing. And here I am taking it over in the motorboat. It got a little wet. And now I've got it all set up on these, on the support, and I'm starting to carve it, but only just started. Unfortunately, I only get to spend the summers up there, and there usually have about 5 other projects going on. So I don't know when it's going to get done, but it is a background job. Any questions about totem poles? Well, I'll finish the totem pole part of this.
What's the meaning of the animals?
Oh, well, they're all, well, I explained the raven and the beaver, which are the 2 on mine. Now, there's a long list I could bring up. I don't want to do it right in the middle, but every one of the animals has a special trait that, so at the end of the talk, I can bring up a separate slideshow which does describe the various traits of the various animals. And the various First Nations, the family groups, they kind of have ownership of certain animals. So certain families will be able to use a wolf, and other ones won't.
It's the doorbell.
Doorbell?
So I don't really quite understand how the family groups work, but I do know that the groups that can, you know, some groups just wouldn't be allowed to use a wolf, they'd have to use a bear or something like that. But I can use everything because I'm out here.
What's your design on your pole that you're making now? You have-
The pole, okay, I have a beaver, a bear holding a fish, a eagle, and a wolf. That I decided they would all be animals that I could see on my lake. So all those animals are there. So, each animal is going to take about 3 feet. And this one, each main animals took about 2 feet. So I have 4 animals, each taking about 3 feet, making up to 12 feet.
What other kind of wood do you use other than cedar?
I don't use anything other than cedar for totem poles. I'll talk about some of the other carving later on where we use some other woods. But for totem poles, really, I guess they can be made out of other wood, but really it's pretty well cedar. Yes?
So you have to treat the wood so it doesn't crack on you?
No, that's not been treated. That's
Not been treated, so-
no, it's not been treated. Other than putting the spar varnish on it.
It's naturally drying.
Yeah, and it was pretty dry when I got the pole.
Okay.
I think Lloyd had dried the poles before I brought them to the course for a couple of years. And this one you see me hauling in the boat. It's been dried for a long time. It could get too dry, I
Yeah.
think.
So does this sit outside, Frank, or is it?
This is outside in the summertime for about 3 months every summer. It sits on the end of my dock. And when I go up there, I put it out on the dock, and when I leave, I take it in. And that's actually also a tradition of the hideout, where they have poles which welcome people, friendly poles, and they have other poles which are kind of scary poles. And you can tell whether you're welcome by the pole they put out for you. It's a really interesting study, and I can't claim to know that much yet. But it's really interesting to study the traditions and the legends and everything. That's just a byproduct that's quite good of all this. Okay, let's move on to a Bentwood box project. That's mine, but there's some other ones that kind of inspired me. This one on here is basically not carved, it's painted. And it's in the Museum of Civilization in Hull. It's quite a big box.